Welcome to a bite-sized edition of Constructive Conversations. Big news out of Victoria. BC's Attorney General has asked her ministry to start drafting prompt payment legislation. This is a major step forward for BC's construction industry, and today we're breaking it down. Joining me is Chris Atchison, the president of the BCCA, BC Construction Association. How you doing, Chris?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Craig.
Of course, has been a long time coming. First off, can you explain the announcement from the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, so we've been busy during Construction and Skilled Trades Month, and last week we had the opportunity to host our BCCA board members who come from all regions of the province in Victoria to do our lobby day at the Ledge. And one of those meetings on Tuesday afternoon was with the Attorney General. And during that meeting, it was made very clear right from the outset that she has appointed a team and a team lead to begin picking up on the recommendations that were made last year by the hard work of a pan industry working group that came together to review other jurisdictions and their legislation across Canada, and that she was going to further that work by picking up with the final drafting of that report, which would then ultimately lead to some legislative recommendations. So it was a big announcement. It did seem to be a statement that we're moving in that direction towards legislation either this fall or at the latest spring of 2026.
Yeah, that's the interesting note is the current House sits until I think it's believed May 25th. And it hasn't been an easy process, but as you're saying, it is a welcome announcement. So my time in politics, I did work in the legislature in Manitoba, and I know drafting of bills and all the steps that go with it. There's about 7 steps involved in this process. So it's welcome, but there is still going to be some time with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have had other milestones in the past where there's been acknowledgement and commitment made to a working group, and I think we want to be careful not to get ahead of our skis here. There's a lot of pieces and a lot of attention that we still need to pay to what's happening in other jurisdictions. We want to make sure that the legislation that we're partners in drafting with the Attorney General's office is reflective of what the industry needs. We've waited this long. We've been urgent about this advocacy priority for a number of years, and a number of myself and a number of our colleagues don't remember a time when the pursuit of prompt payment legislation wasn't a priority of our respective stakeholders. So, but we want to be very careful that we get this right. So the idea would be that we model something like that exists in Ontario with the Construction Act, and they've had the better part of 7 years now to continue to refine the Construction Act, and it includes lien reform, it includes prompt payment legislation, and it also includes an adjudication process. And the Attorney General did make it very clear that whatever our adjudication system looks like, it's going to be paid for by the industry, which means the parties that are in dispute are funded, it's self-funded. And of course, that makes total sense. And I would hazard to say that anything that we would envision along the lines of what Ontario is doing would be a whole lot more affordable to all parties than tying up the courts, tying up a legal process, and making sure we have industry subject matter experts that are acting as adjudicators in good faith for both parties.
And we should point that out. You and I were actually in Quebec City, and we were chatting with a representative from Ontario. And I mean, even Manitoba, there's version 2.0, there could be version 4.0, but it's still a process. So, what can people do to kind of keep in the loop? How do we ask industry stakeholders to stay involved with us and support this effort as it moves forward?
Yeah, well, first off, there's going to be a meeting that we'll be having with representatives from the Attorney General's office. We're hoping to set that up in the next couple of weeks to make sure that all of the information that industry has made available, including that cross-jurisdictional analysis, including the reports that have been submitted, also including the knowledge and information that we have from recent amendments to the Construction Act in Alberta and to the prompt payment legislation system that exists in Alberta. So both of those significant entities that we're looking at, those jurisdictions have already made modifications to their initial legislation. And in the case of the Construction Act in Ontario, it was something like 93 recommendations that they made to positively amend the legislation, and all of those were accepted by the Attorney General's office. So it's an ongoing collaboration of let's implement, let's review, let's refine. And I think BC has a lot to gain from the experience of those two jurisdictions for sure, and a lot of lessons that we can bring back to the Attorney General's office and just say, this is how we want to model the industry as it makes the most sense for the province and for communities throughout BC that depend on the construction industry.
And it's important to stay part of these conversations, like you're saying, because there's several steps to the process. There's the drafting of the bill, there's the first reading when it hits the floor, second reading, but there's also committee stage, and that's also key. I know that in past dealings in the legislature, there is that where a lot of the MLAs come together, but they're also consulting with industry on the final stages of the legislation. So it's important to pay attention to where it's at in the legislature as well. So what does this mean for the industry? I know we've talked about it a lot. It's been out there. Maybe just a refresher on what it exactly the benefits of for the industry.
Well,
besides the obvious.
Yeah, besides the obvious. Well, it might not be obvious to everybody, and I think one of the things that you mentioned just a moment ago, Craig, that's making me think this is worth mentioning is that when we did meet with our with the MLAs and with the ministers and with the Attorney General last week. It was very, very much a lot of head nodding amongst both parties. I would say all parties. And even during the election campaign, the Green Party came out and said that if they were elected, they would enact prompt payment legislation within the first term. So we met with members of the Conservative caucus. We met with ministers and MLAs from the NDP. And all of them, as we talked about the need for payment certainty in the industry, there was head nodding. There was assurances made that this is something that the industry has advocated for long and hard for a number of years. And folks were starting to understand the need for BC to come in line with the rest of the rest of the country. So I think what it means, though, to get right to the nub of the question, is that this means that those folks who build British Columbia can have a sense of certainty that payment for work that they've done is coming. Whereas in the marketplace today, we have absence of communication, we have contracts that can be ignored, we have leverage that can be asserted upon those farther down the construction pyramid without any chance of remedy or obligation to remedy. And so this opens up as soon as you have legislation, you have an awareness that contracts don't get you out of legislation that exists. You can't contract out of the law. And so what we're hoping for is that this will instill this sense of pride, communication, and certainty that payment will flow. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier and says, well, what does this mean for the workers in the industry? And I said, well, let's be completely honest. There's not a lot of workers who aren't being paid right now. And that's because owners and contractors are making sure that their most valuable assets are being paid on time on a regular schedule and that their benefits are being covered. But the undercurrent of uncertainty, the undercurrent of risk that they might not be aware of is that hidden dragon that our industry is walking gingerly upon right now. And so by delivering payment certainty, all of a sudden you've got business confidence, all of a sudden you have business certainty, and those employees who are currently being paid for by lines of credit, loans, and other means to make sure that they're there to do the work tomorrow, all of a sudden have a layer of certainty to protect them as well. So this is good news for everybody, manufacturers, suppliers, employers, contractors, whether you're a trade contractor, whether you're a general contractor, whether you're an owner. everybody now has an opportunity to participate and to be certain that payment is assured through work that's completed throughout the construction continuum.
And especially during now these very uncertain times with tariffs, it's just an added layer to that. So it's just it's definitely what I think you called it common sense legislation once, and it's very very true.
Yeah, it's so timely right now for us to be able to deliver in partnership with government on something that we've asked for. And we've been frustrated by inaction for a very long period of time. But in these past few months, where it seems like our whole nation and province by province and community by community is sort of racked by this measure of uncertainty and chaos that is unescapable. We can't get ourselves away from having conversations about what is going on. Like, this is just a new world that we're living in and being forced to adapt to on a daily, if not weekly basis. But some of the conversations have been about, well, what can we do for ourselves? And where we're talking about, this pride in Canada, Canada becoming more self-reliant. Let's remove some interprovincial trade barriers. Let's become more harmonized as a nation. This gives us a wonderful opportunity to reignite some of these conversations around prompt payment legislation, adjudication, and lien reform, because our neighbors to the immediate east in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario have created a sense of confidence with their construction community that says, this is the way we're going, this is the path we're on, and we want to provide a level of certainty to those who need to build our infrastructure, for those who need to build our homes, or those that we need to build our infrastructure and homes. So BC can't have it both ways. We're standing up to the chaos on a number of fronts, but we also have to signal to business that we're willing to do what it takes to harmonize with best practices that exist in other provinces. So this is a legislation that is both timely and telling, that it matters to our provincial leaders that the construction community is both needed and it's going to be protected. And to me, this is a certainty that we can bring about in this time where there's tremendous uncertainty within our nation and maybe even globally. It's doing our part.
Very well said. Well, Chris, thank you for joining us. Thank you for breaking it down. Any final remarks?
No, we're looking forward to the work, right? Like, getting to this point has been, like I've said before, it's been a labor of. We've been on a bit of a mission for this, and there's other amazing stakeholders and partner associations that are all part of this journey. The news that came from the Attorney General's office last week is incredibly welcome, and we know that there's a lot of hard work ahead for us to get this to legislation. And when we get the legislation right, we know that there will be bipartisan support, or for this in the legislature, and then it will become a reality in British Columbia, and we'll be better off for it.
There is a giant light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you very much, Chris. Of course, if you want more information on any prompt payment legislation or what the work that has been put in to get the legislation done by stakeholders and Chris himself, you can head to the BCCA website and check out all that information. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Craig. Take care.